All right, hopefully you've enjoyed the toe-to-toe ruling video that went up just recently. I'll put it somewhere up there so you can see it again. But anyway, today we're actually going to go through the 1.6 rules. Now, are there rules differences in this set? Yeah, there's actually a few things that are a bit different. We're still discussing these rules as of making this video over on my Discord channel. Drop down in Discord. Link will be down below. Come check it out. Like I said, we're kind of going into all the 1.6 stuff because I'm still like I've went through it, but I think there is some like nuanced things that we're still kind of discussing and figuring out and talking through, which is pretty interesting stuff. So anyway, big shout out to the Discord. Make sure you join it if you want to have discussions about that or other games or whatever else. Or if you want to talk about it on a live stream, head over to twitch.tv/D20Woodworking. Always love talking about rules stuff. So, what we're going to do for this video today is go through the article itself. We'll kind of go quickly over the toe-to-toe section of it, but we'll go through the rest of the article. And then we're going to pop into the actual rule book itself, or the new rule book, rules reference. And we're really just going to go through the summary of notable changes. Now, there are extra changes on top of that. And if people want me to cover it, I'll be happy to. But usually the summary is kind of like the big thing, right? So we'll focus on that for a bit. This might be a little bit longer of a video because we have a lot to cover. So we'll get into that and whatnot. So let us pop down or pop over to the screen and read the release. All right, so first, this is the change in the game. Tony, also, I didn't realize the first time I read this that Tony actually is presenting these rules, which is kind of interesting that they, that always has been kind of like Caleb's, not, it hasn't always been Caleb's baby, right? Like it started off as Boggs' thing, and Caleb was on since the very beginning, and then Caleb has kind of taken over, and now it seems like they're passing the reins like a little more to Tony. And again, if the changes that have been made are indicative of the direction the game is going, I think it's a good thing. I like pretty much all these changes. I still wish there were some extra things that were done and touched on, but it hasn't happened yet, but maybe they will some point in the future. So anyway, greeting heroes. The Marvel Champions the card game rules team is, and which is also like, it's kind of funny when they say that because it's like 2 people, and I feel for them, right? Maybe 3 if you can count Caleb, right? But it's like Alex, Tony, and Caleb, I guess. Like maybe there's more people we just don't know about behind the scenes, but like I feel for them because they field so many questions. So hopefully after this they don't have to field as many, but I guess we'll find out. Is pleased to present to you version 1.6 of our online rules reference. This update is intended to add new rules introduced to the game since our last update, which has been a little while. It's been like a year since they did the 1.5, so it's kind of good. Address some areas where the rules were not addressed previously and add some clarity to some areas that were previously unclear. All these updates are intended to make your Marvel Champions make your games of Marvel Champions play as smoothly as possible. This was the big thing, right? This is the thing we talk about in this channel. A lot of other channels talk about it as well, is that we just want the game to run kind of how you think it should, right? Like, it's always a weird feeling when you're in the middle of a game, you go, I don't know how this interaction should work. Like, I have no idea. I have a guess, I guess, but like, I have no idea. And they really, I think they did a pretty good job overall of getting it to a point where you're just like, okay, like these interactions like make a bit more sense. Not everything is fixed, but I don't think you're gonna fix everything with one, basic version, right? 1.1 version. Like, not everything's gonna get fixed, but as long as we make steps in the right direction, it's good enough for me. So today we would like to discuss some of the more important changes made in this update, so you will know that those changes are what those changes are and why they were made. All right, so updates to target rules, and this is a pretty interesting one. So the big change in the previous update to the rules reference was to switch from rules requiring an ability to change the game state in order to be initiated to instead require that each ability have a valid target. This is actually really nice because we've gotten these Hall of Heroes rulings that talked about valid targets, and then people were like, well, did the game actually change or did it not change, right? There was just some inconsistencies there. That's what this is really addressing, is those inconsistencies. So the whole idea of the game state has to change doesn't have to do that anymore. There just has to be a valid target. So the target section of the rules defines a valid target as a game element that can be affected by an ability. To help you determine whether a target can be affected by ability, we have added a list of examples of things that qualify as affecting a target. These are dealing, healing damage, adding, removing threat, giving, removing a status card, exhausting, readying, the target and defeating, discarding the target. Now, a lot of this people will be like, well, that sounds like changing the game state. And for the vast majority of the time, it probably will be. I think it's more for like the nuanced rules interaction. And again, just streamlining things that's going to help out with things. But I'm sure there are like, and you can write down in the comments, I'm sure there's examples where that is not quite the thing, right? Also, in this update, we have broadened the valid target rules applied to game functions, which primarily refers to the use of basic powers. It was always our intention that heroes and allies must have a valid target in order to perform a basic thwart or basic attack, and that is now reflected in the target sections of the rules. We have, however, carved out an exception for heroes and allies with a thwart of 0. So your Hulk, which is the Hulk hero, can still continue to making an entrance. This is to add the +2 onto the thwarting. Right, and after the thwart ends, if you remove all the threat from the scheme, heal 2 damage to your hero, which I don't think I've ever used that card for Hulk, but it's not a bad idea. Note that the value of 0 is different than the value of a dash. So just FYI, which the dash means that they can never use that basic power. Finally, we have codified a rule that has established across multiple rulings and questions as we received that any effect that would use the wording "that target" refers to the target of the previous effect and can only be resolved for the valid target of the previous effect. For example, concussive blow cannot target an enemy that is already confused in order to deal damage because that enemy is not a valid target. This was one that we actually did discuss this in our Discord chat, because it says confuse an enemy, and then if you pay for this card using a fist resource, deal 3 damage to enemy. And the big argument was, well, can I just skip over the confusing enemy part if they're already confused? Like, do I have to confuse the enemy as long as if I paid for with a strength resource, and can I deal 3 damage, right? Like, do I have to confuse that enemy? And there was a lot of arguments for both ways from it. Now it's basically confirmed. Again, there has to be a target for it, right? And has to be a target, and also that that target refers to the previously resolved target. So FYI, that's now kind of fixed and kind of made better, more clear. I should say fixed and made better. It's more clear to understand now. All right, so this is the whole toe-to-toe section. Like I said, we did a video on this. Go check out the video. We already talked about this, so there's no reason to really cover this one again. So initiating abilities, there are 2 updates of note in this section. First, we've added a step to this process in which the player who is playing a card places the card face up on the table in front of them while they pay for its cost, and in the case of events, resolves its effects. The card is not considered in play at this time. Allies, player side schemes, supports, and upgrades are not considered to enter play until step 6 of the initiating abilities process, and we'll go through that process, I'm sure, in a little bit. But step 6 with it. These rules apply when Magic is playing a card from the top of her deck. As soon as she determines that card can be played, she moves it to the table and flips the next card face up in her deck before finishing the process of this card. This also, because like there was times when like you would play the card from the top and it would say like the icon on the top of the deck, and people are like, well, do you flip it over right away or do you not? Right, kind of fixes that problem. Second, we have removed the previous step 5 of the initiation process. This step read, make all choose decisions required to resolve the card. Instead of making these decisions up front, it makes more sense, and some abilities require, that these choices are made when the sentence that includes the choice is being resolved. You must still check that the ability has at least 1 valid target during step 1 of initiating process, but your choice of target is not locked in until you resolve the sentence in which the choice is made. Again, if the board state changes and the thing you are going to do no longer exists, well, that kind of stinks, right? And I think a lot of people kind of inherently played this way. Again, I don't want to gloss over this too much because I'm sure there's some fringe rule stuff that have happened. I'm sure it's happened in my games, but just general speaking things. Referential abilities. With numerous heroes, allies, villains, and minions sharing the same tiles each other, determining whom is being referred to by abilities that name a card title has gotten tricky. We can already tell what this is because we've definitely explored the whole Nebula thing, and I'm sure they'll talk about it. I'm pretty sure they do talk about it, but to simplify things, we have created a tiered system for determining which card is being referred to by an ability that uses the card's title. When an ability refers to the card title, it refers to the cards that fit the card tier highest on the list. So first is the card on which the ability is printed, cards that belong to the same identity or encounter set, and all other cards. So this means basic Spider-Man, which is this one. After Spider-Man attacks or thwarts, choose another Web Warrior character in play. And you can already tell when Spider-Man attacks, well, is it when this Spider-Man attacks or when it's another Spider-Man attacks, right? It could be anyone. It could be any Spider-Man. That was a part of the problem that they were having with this. Ally's response only to himself, while Lethal Weapon will only attach to the Gamora minion. For those that don't know, like you could play back in the day, you could play Nebula and Gamora, right? 2-player. And if you got Nebula's Nemesis and attached to Gamora, you could just attach this to the other hero and get him a +1 attack. I'm pretty sure Nelson and I did this a couple times on his channel. It was a great way to beat the system, but now you can no longer do that. The ruling makes sense, right? It makes sense. I shouldn't have been allowed to do that. We were just having fun with the game, but yeah. So this means that old rivals no longer functions as as intended. So we changed the text to function as originally intended. So this says Gamora attacks you. If no attack was made this way, this card gains surge. Now again, this is because they get kind of right themselves in the rules corner. Or they don't really say what the errata is, so we'll go into what it is in a second. Actually, can we just go into it now? I just want to go into the errata now with this, because I want to see. I don't think I actually saw the wording of it. Oh boy. Oh boy, this is a real slow internet speed. Okay, so Gambit, Nova, Mutant Genesis version, blah blah. Oh wait, no, we went too far. Twisted Reality. Oh, rivals. Gamora attacks you. If the Gamora hero or ally is in play, she attacks you. Resolve her attack against you without exhausting her. If no attack was made this way, this card gains surge. So again, this is now stating that it would only be like before, but by the rules exception of what it was saying, it would have to be like the Nemesis Gamora would attack you. Now it's saying that basically any Gamora, if the Gamora ally or hero is in play, she attacks you, resolve her attack against you without exhausting her. No attack was made this way to gain surge, right? So any Gamora that's out there is going to now attack you, which makes sense. It's kind of how we were playing it. Well, it's not really how we were playing because we were trying to beat the system, but it's how you should play it, right? All right, so quick notes. The following updates are important enough to note, but don't require in-depth explanation. So attack enemy activation, attack player type, and attack against allies. We have formalized the order of resolution for abilities that are triggered by attacks. Additionally, we have revised how attacks against allies are handled. Now, every enemy attack is considered to target both a player and a character. It's kind of big. In the standard case, the targets of an attack are the hero being attacked and the player controlling that hero. With attacks against allies, the targets of the attack are the specific ally and the player controlling that ally. All right, so cost. If the cost uses the word choose, the player playing the cost can choose game elements they do not control, which is interesting. Damage, we have added a timing chart for the resolution of effects surrounding the dealing and taking of damage, which I really wanted them to get rid of deal and take. I really hate deal and take. It's really frustrating rule. I get why they have it, but it's still frustrating. So anyway, that's just a little thing. Hopefully 1.7 fixes that. And same with paying and overpaying. That needs to go too. We have significantly expanded this section. Find. To use the word find. So yeah, find just it needed to be specified because there's so many different things now with Victor Display and face down cards, and that all makes sense. Label ability. This new section compiles all the rules around label abilities. So an example would be those with the attack or defense or thwart, followed by the bold timing trigger. The only one of those rules that is new to the rules reference is how you handle attack and thwarts. This is actually a really nice change that they're making. If a character has any status card that would cancel any of these label types, then all the abilities effects are canceled by that status. In such cases, the character will remove all statuses that cancel that type of label cards. So for example, if you had hit and run, you would remove, and you were stunned and confused, right? So you're stunned and confused. You can now play hit and run to take away the stun and the confuse, which I actually really like this change, because before we were kind of like, one, we didn't know how to happen, or we were just choosing one or the other. Now it would take out both of them, which is really, really cool. It kind of buffs up the value of attack and thwart cards, like the combined attack and thwart cards a little bit, which is really nice. So max and maximum, this section has been expanded to cover more uses of the term max and maximum to address the recent questions with supercharged upgrades. So we'll get into this a little bit. Play and put into play. We have established that the text hero form only, such as webbed up, prevents such cards from being played and from being put into play when the player's identity is not in hero form. So again, this says hero form only, attached to an enemy. When attached enemy would attack, discard and stun this, whatever. Okay. Player elimination just kind of clears all this up again. When they're removed from the game, you remove all the player cards. It's also really fun that they added this whole day, so they don't have to wait to get all their cards and whatnot. It's kind of fun they added that, but okay. Status cards, they tweak the language. So these effects are now treated as canceling the effects of thwarts and schemes and attacks. Does not change how these statuses function in practice, but allows us to describe their functions more precisely, which is helpful because a lot of people are getting confused, like, well, if I attack, like what happens? Is it in place of? Is it this? Canceling is a good word, like it. Teamwork, as we mentioned previously, we've already talked about this. The Age of Apocalypse expansion changed the rules for the teamwork keyword. It's now reflecting the rules reference. Again, teamwork was if one card with a teamwork, if one person with a teamwork keyword was in and the second one came in, originally they both attacked you, which was wild. Now I think it's just the first one, if I remember correctly. So they just updated that. We knew they were going to. That's totally cool. And all the errata cards are placed on this update are technical in nature, made to keep cards functioning as intended under the current rules. So we're going to glance through the rule book just a little bit. Like I said, we're not going to go super in depth with a lot of this stuff. We're going to keep it pretty basic, I think, because again, I don't want to get too crazy with this. So first, we'll go to page 6. So this is the timing around the activation. These, as I talked about in the toe-to-toe ruling, this is what that covers. So that's all that is. Again, if you want to learn more about that, watch the toe-to-toe video. All right. So page 8 to 10 expand on a stepwise process for attacks. So the enemy activation section is kind of redone. And I think they redid a lot of it. Basically everything in red was redone. So the big thing is the enemy activation. So enemy attacks are always initiated against both a player and a character. Again, they kind of rules reference talked about this a little bit in the beginning. Normally the attacked character is the player's hero, but abilities can instead cause an enemy to attack a player's alter ego or an ally that player controls. And again, these are newer things that didn't exist back in the day, so it's good that they're addressing these. In all these cases, the player is still considered attacked. And again, the reason why this is important, as we talked about with payback, if they're targeting just your ally, would you be able to play payback? Well, not in the past, but now you can. So that's where it helps. If a player other than the attack player defends the attack with the character they control, that player becomes the new target of the attack. So abilities that trigger when after enemy attacks you or are resolved when after a player is attacked, regardless of which character they control was attacked. For example, Ultron reads force response after Ultron attacks you. Choose either place one threat in the main scheme or face down as a draw minion. This effect resolves against the attacked player, regardless if the player used an ally to defend an attack. Again, there was some confusion with this. They're like, well, they didn't attack me, they attack the ally, right? So it helps clear some of that up. I don't think there's anything player ability type. I don't think they got into that too much, right? Oh wait, yeah. The order of resolution. That's right. So let's talk about this. If a defending ally leaves player prior to damage from the attack being dealt, the attack is considered to have no character defending. It's good to note. The attack finishes. Okay, so this is the whole retaliate keyword, right? And we talked about this in another video before about retaliate. If I remember, I'll put it up top. But the attack finishes resolving the following steps, types of abilities trigger in order. So first, the retaliate X keyword. If the attack character was not defeated, so again, villain defeat now counts. So if you defeated stage 1 to stage 2 of the villain, doesn't matter if there's retaliate on the first one or the second one or both of them, none of that matters. They're not going to retaliate, right? Because they were defeated. So the villain defeat happened, and because that villain defeat happened, the retaliate keyword won't trigger, right? It's important to know. Forced abilities with the following triggers in any order. After character attacks and damages defeats you and ally, after character is attacked, after character defends against attack and takes no damage, right? These are all the different cards you can kind of like deal with at that time. So that's fixing that. So the order of resolutions for abilities triggered by the resolution as attack follows the retaliate keyword, again if not attacked by the ability. This is actually just going through this again, right? This is because one's the enemy activation and one's the player ability. So that's what it's just kind of going through that. Okay. Page 13 is adding stepwise process for dealing damage. Does it have that? There we go. So there's cost and that's it, right? Oh, wait. This said page 13, but it's really 14. So whatever, that's fine. I guess because damage is started on that. I guess that's why doing that. So again, they do some stuff with the cost, text indicating the timing of interrupt and all that fun. Like we're not gonna. If you guys want us to get into that stuff and there's things that confuse you, we can do that later on. Okay, so the order of resolution for effects surrounding the dealing and taking of damage are as follows, and this is probably gonna be like the new chart to know. This is actually on page 14. Learn this chart. I think this chart will be super helpful for a lot of people. So the order of resolutions for effects surrounding the dealing and taking damage as follows. Number 1, abilities that trigger when character would deal be dealt any amount of damage. So that triggers. Then tough status cards. Okay. Then abilities that trigger when character would take any amount of damage. Then abilities that trigger when character takes any amount of damage, then placing the damage on the character, then abilities that trigger when character would be defeated, then abilities that trigger when character is defeated, then when defeated. It's also wild that we have like 3 forms of that essentially, but whatever. Then discarding of a defeated character, 4 forms, and then abilities that trigger after character is dealt damage, any amount of damage, or after character is defeated, defeat, right? This is just going to be a nice thing. Also, it's kind of interesting to me with the whole would be dealt damage. So a lot of us, one of the issues we had was when there's a tough status, would they take damage, right? And our whole argument was, well, no, they wouldn't because they have a tough status. So this kind of like puts that into an interesting order now. This is something I'm sure we'll be discussing more in detail. It's really interesting with this and these changes. Again, this is, I know, one of the things that we'll probably be talking about when I'm talking in a separate group about this. Anyway, learn page 14 chart. Page 14 chart, I think, will be very good and useful for people. Expand the fine rules on page 18. We kind of talked about this. It's not that crazy, these rules. These make sense. But when it's asking to find a card, players should not unnecessarily search game areas if they know where the card they are looking for can be found, which is okay. So this is actually kind of an interesting rule, right? This is actually an interesting rule. So there are times, and I actually want this cleaned up a little bit, because there are times when I know a card that I'm searching for is in the enemy discard pile, right? The encounter card discard pile. I know it's in there, but because it says I can search for the encounter discard pile and the encounter deck, I will look through the encounter deck to see what's left. Now, theoretically, I can go through the entire discard pile and kind of figure out what's in there, but I use it as a cheat way to like look through the encounter deck. So this rule makes it sound like it's to get rid of that. Now, I don't know if it actually is or is not. To me, it's, again, to streamline the process. You're not like, because if it says like look through this deck and then this deck and then this deck, it's like trying to streamline the process. But I don't know if that would actually stop me from looking in the encounter deck or not. It's kind of an interesting situation. Maybe I wasn't allowed to do that anyway. Who knows? All game areas are subject to search when resolving a find instruction, with the following exceptions: face down encounter cards, the victory display, cards that have been removed for the game, which is good that they clarify all this stuff, because again, this stuff didn't exist when this first came out, so that's good. If a player is instructed to find and reveal a minion that is already in play, that player engages that minion, resolves any keywords, and there is triggered an ability. That minion retains all attachments and tokens on it. The minion is not considered to be entering play, and the minion is considered to be engaged with the player unless it's already engaged with the player. Now, this is kind of interesting, again, because if a player is instructed to find and reveal a minion that is already in play, that player engages that minion, resolves the keywords. So there have been times when you had to find a certain minion and you're like, oh, it's already there, we're good to go, don't have to worry about it. Nah, assuming you couldn't find, I'm assuming still, and I have to double check this, that if there's a second copy of that minion in the deck, I should be able to pull that second copy if I really wanted to. But regardless, the at least the one that's there, if there's only one copy of that card, you can't just be like, oh, oops, it's all good now. No, like you redo whatever that card says. And maybe that's not a bad thing, but maybe it can be. So anyway, that'll be a thing moving forward to note with that. Okay, so page 23, revised stepwise process for initiating abilities. Initiating abilities, they have just a few posts right here. So basically, when a player wishes to play a card or initiate a triggered ability, this is actually a really important thing to note. Page 23, a lot of people's questions I think can be solved with this section of the rules. When a player wishes to play a card or initiate a triggered ability, that player first declares their intent. Then the player checks the following conditions in order. So 1, check play restrictions. Can the card be played, or is the ability initiated at this time? If the card or ability specifies one or more targets, check that it has at least one valid target. If the card or ability does not have one of those, it cannot be played. Right, so we can't do that. We're good there. So number 2, then determine the cost or cost to play the card and initiate the ability, and the player's ability to pay them, taking modifiers into account. Then, assuming you did those 2 things, which these rules didn't even really change that much except for this little sentence. But again, I think a lot of people get confused with this. Really learn this section. This will help you out with a lot of things. So assuming both these conditions are met, if playing a card, the player places the card face up on the table in front of them. This card is not in play. Again, people had confusion with like if a card's in play, where it's placed, what it means, whatever, right? There's some confusion with it. They're just specifying that. So that's all it really does. But I do want to stress, learn this rule. It will help you a lot with playing cards. Page 23, initiating abilities. All right, we're getting near the end. So what we got next? Page 33, revise how referential abilities are interpreted. So we'll jump to 33. Referential ability. Some abilities refer to specific cards by name. These are called referential abilities. If an ability refers to its title card by multiple cards in the game, that ability refers to only the cards that match the criteria of the highest value of this list. And we went over this list already. So again, this was the Spider-Man Peter Parker card with the ally. Well, if it was any Spider-Man, can any Spider-Man trigger it? Like, we all knew deep down it really couldn't. But because of how the rules were written, there are some kind of gray areas where maybe it could. So, all right, so page 39 is going to be expanding, target rules. So, target. All right, so if a game function or card ability is directed toward a game element, such as attack that deals damage to an enemy, that game element becomes a target of that function. So examples of targets include but are not limited to the villain, the minion, enemies, you, the player, blah, 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 blah. If an ability or game function requires one or more targets, that ability or game function can only be initiated if at least one valid target. For example, an ability that says deal 5 damage to a minion cannot be played if there are no minions in play. This was actually kind of discussed a little while back with, I believe it was Melee was the card. And I brought it up here for you really quick. So Melee said, hero action, deal 3 damage to an enemy, deal 3 damage to another enemy. So this is actually kind of referencing this card, this game function, whatnot, with having one valid target. Again, because people are like, well, if there's only one enemy and not a second enemy, can I play Melee or not? Because there's no second enemy. They're saying as long as there's one there, so you can deal 3 damage to an enemy, then you're good to go, right? There doesn't have to be a second one in order to play this card. So it makes the card a little more viable, but still a pretty expensive card for 3 damage. Basic powers are game functions that require a valid target. So again, we kind of talked a lot about this targeting stuff, but abilities that cause a player to draw one or more cards always have a valid target so long as the player has at least one card in their deck. A target that is valid for an ability or game function if any part of the ability can affect the target. Examples of effects on target include, but not limited to, dealing, healing. Again, we read all this. This talks about the exception that you have to note with 0, attack, and thwart, and all that stuff. So they kind of go through all that. Damage that is dealt but not taken. For example, if damage is prevented, is considered an effect. Is considered to affect a target. A target that cannot take damage is not valid for a target of an ability that deals damage, which again inherently makes sense. An effect that uses that target refers to the target of the previous effect that can only be resolved for the valid target of the previous effect. For the previous effect. Yeah. Okay, so again, this was the whole deal 5 damage to an enemy, stun that enemy can only be used to stun an enemy that can be dealt, then take damage, right? This was the concussive blow thing. They're just doing it backwards for whatever reason, but that's basically what that refers to. All right, so after that, we have, okay, so the teamwork trait. We'll look at this really quick because I can't remember if it's the new one or the old one that attacks. But the trait, teamwork, wherever it is, teamwork. The minion. Okay, so after a minion with teamwork enters play and engages a player, if there's at least one other minion that shares a specific trait, the minion that just entered play. So it used to be both of them. It's the one that just enters play, not the old one. The new one is the one that activates against you. All right, so then they do. They added the appendix FAQ on page 52, 58, and 59 to 62. I don't know if we're gonna really cover all this stuff. I think we're gonna do a separate video for all this stuff because there's a lot of pages to cover, and I don't want to get like too bogged down in this because it's already becoming a long video. All right, so I realized as I was editing this video, I forgot to talk about the whole maximum thing and dealing with Bishop's supercharge card, right? When the big thing was when you make a basic attack, discard supercharged, you get +2 attack for this card for each charge counter here, maximum of 8. People were wondering, well, if you have 2 of them, is it a maximum of 8 still, or is it a maximum of 16? Under page 26, under maximum, there's a whole section here, but the big part to know with this is that the parenthetical to the maximum value within an ability imposes a maximum of that ability for the duration of that ability. A maximum in the form of to the maximum of plus X applies only to the ability that includes the maximum. For example, multiple abilities with the text to a maximum of 3 attack can be used in combination to increase the character's attack above the 3. And they go into other examples too with like the max 1 per, ally or max whatever. And you can read all that, but I forgot to address that one extra thing. So again, a lot of these rules aren't massive changes. There's a few small ones. I'm sure there's stuff I'm overlooking because again, I've only had a little bit of time with this book, but I'm sure there's extra ones. But if you have some rules questions, let us know down in the comments. While you're down there, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. It helps out the channel. But if you want like quicker access to like the answers, like I said, join the Discord. The link is down below. Everyone's welcome. Even if you don't want to talk Marvel Champions, but you want to talk other games, we do that too, right? We talk about all the other games. We have a really good time. Make sure to check it out. But overall with this rules reference, I know that their goal was to help clear up and streamline parts of the game, make it easier for people, and I'm 100% on board with that decision. And they did that, right? They did that with this book, or they made the right steps toward that. There are still things I want to see changed and done, and maybe that's a video we'll do in the future. So there's still things I want. So it's not like this is like perfected, but I don't expect perfection with a 0.1, rules update. I just expect them to make progress and to make things better. And I think this is a really good book. Difference that Tony did. I think Tony did a phenomenal job working on this, and everyone that worked on this book with them, I think they all did a phenomenal job. So kudos to them. I'm really excited about this. Again, anything that just makes this easier, makes it so that we have less questions when we're actually playing the game, makes it easier for new players to get into it. 100% on board. I'm really excited for this. I really am. So yeah, they did a great job with this. Kudos to all of them. And like I said, if you have any rules questions, let me know in the comments or join the Discord. I'll see you all next time.